Welcome to another episode of Fran X, where we are here to answer your questions in real time. We have plenty of topics to talk about, including when we're off air and Charles says Expos don't work. We'll talk about that coming up next. See, I like the hard pause when I throw Charles under a bus for talking about Expos not working before we go online.
We could talk about all these things, but for today, Nicholas, why don't we set up today's conversation and what we're going to attack this afternoon?
Well, it's a Ask Us Anything. So now that I marketed this the right way, we actually have live viewers. And so if any of our viewers have comments or questions that you want to address, please enter it into the chat. I do think there are a few things worth talking about, and I do think we should talk about the Expo because it's coming up here in 2 weeks in New York. And is that a viable and right solution for franchisors to invest their money in? That's the question. Brent, do you want to give your opinion first?
No, it's not. No, I mean, I think there's value if you go to make relationships and find, if you have a specific need and you're looking for a supplier and you're thinking about bringing someone on, I think there's really good networking that happens there. So I think it's a great place to find suppliers. I think they've probably sold 3 franchises in about 18 years totally, collectively. I don't think it's a great investment. The ROI sucks. It's tricky. It's tricky. So no, I'm very low on trade shows, not just that one, but them in general.
Well, Charles is going to go next, and I think the beauty of your answer is you just teed things up fantastically, because Charles will usually say the same thing offline and then he cowers online. But now you just threw the gauntlet, like you started the franchise fight this week, so now Charles is here to back you up in your corner. Charles.
Yeah, I couple of things, right? Exposition started way back before there was television and people would need to meet up to Expo, right? And communicate. So I agree with Brent, it's tricky. And it depends on the franchisor level. You have startup, emerging franchisors. If you are 2 years into your franchise journey, in my opinion, do not go to an Expo. There's a very significant opportunity cost to the money you're spending and the time you're spending. You could be deploying that capital in a much stronger way. So for the startup and emerging, I don't think it's worthwhile, at least in your first 2 years, right? Why? Because you're going to get thrown into the trade show. You're going to be unprepared. You're going to have conversations you're not prepared for. If you're a restaurant, you're going to talk about how good your food is and not your opportunity. I see so many emerging brands that haven't really drilled down what their opportunity profile, what they're offering, and then they come to the Expo, they're wasting time, money. So I'd spend the time, I'd spend the money drilling down on my offering, drilling down on my digital, drilling down on my founder story. And only after I do that would I evaluate it. And a big frustration for me too, there's these franchise development companies out there that own Expos or are all connected. And I get these entrepreneurs who are like all pumped up about franchising because a developer called them and said, not only are we going to franchise your business, we're going to sell franchises and you're going to come to all these 4 Expos over the next year. And it's just taking money. So I don't think they're worthwhile, at least for emerging brands, at least initially. What do you think, Nick? Did I shy away from that?
No, I'm proud of you. Like that's probably the best honest answer that I've heard from you in quite some time. And that means I no longer.
That's a little dramatic in the best. That is like the most dramatic thing I've ever heard. Okay.
No, okay. Let me change my statement. Then I'm going to give you my answer. That is the earliest in a Fran X that you've thrown down in a gauntlet, but it's only because Brent gave you permission to do it.
Well,
usually it's like in the last 30 seconds of this, you throw the franchise fight out there. So like we have one person, Kirk is sitting there watching our podcast at the end.
It's not a fight, but I think the ROI is very, very difficult.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let me explain why it's a fight, and then I'm going to give my answer. It's a fight because of this, and this is part of my answer. I really do feel this way more so today than ever before. There are so many vendor suppliers that are gouging the emerging brand, stealing from them, taking money out of their pockets for false hope that if they do X, they're going to have this big explosion of growth and win. And so the fight side on this is put it into a category of everybody's like clawing for this money when a new franchisor is created. And the way that they claw for this money is they throw shade on other businesses. So like that one is false and this one cheats you this way. And it's not with the purpose of how do we give the franchisor the best tools to win. And to be clear, this is happening on the franchisee side with this bullshit stealing from the franchisee on jacked up franchise fees where all the fees go to brokers and FSOs and not enough money is there to support the franchisee to actually have success. So my frustration on that on both sides is quite large. On the Expo front, here's the deal. We are exhibiting. We spent $8,000 on a booth. Now we got to pay for the carpet and the electricity and the two chairs. The two chairs are actually more expensive to rent the two chairs than to go buy them at Target and have them in there. So we'll probably do that.
Do you pay extra for the waste paper basket?
We probably will, which is also built out of paper, which is kind of like that's kind of ironic. But the reason we're doing it this year is partly because of what you just said, Charles. I think one, the Expos have been blockbustered. Sorry, if you want to make a change, you're going to have to make a change. What Charles said in the beginning is so genius that, yeah, what is an exposition? It was a gathering place because there's no technology like this. You can't use this to go search for franchise brands. So it was an important part of the puzzle because it just like the ability to understand what existed in the marketplace and how did it align back to what you had financially was very limited. And so, but things have changed. And what's not changing is the way the Expos are structured. I've said this 400 times. If I owned the Expo, lane 1 is investments of 50 grand. Lane 2 is 100 grand. Lane 3 is 100 to 250, 250 to 5 to $1 million and $1 million plus. And if you did it that way, then when the buyer walks into this giant exposition hall in the Javits Center, then what they can do is they know which direction to go. I've said the same for an IFA, but there's too many politics that if you organize and put all the law firms down one aisle, at least you're seeing apples to apples and trying to figure out who matches with you on the same things that franchisees want, which is business model and your culture. And so why not just make it very simplistic for the buyer to go through this? It's because there's too much competition. There's too much dagger throwing in this industry, more in franchising than I think in many, many others. And so like we're exhibiting because one, it's chaos. So we see a whole bunch of franchisors that are going to spend, somewhere in the range of 20 grand for this crapshoot. Some of them are going to get deals out of this show. I promise you deals will get done at this show, but some is not most. And so now you're going to have most that leave this show saying, I spent 20 grand. I was away from my family. You're fined $500 if you close down before 4 p.m. on Saturday. And so all this like political stuff it exists. And so we're going to look at that and say, okay, how can we take these franchisors? How can we help them? On the supplier side, all three of us have done Fran Camp. We're building relationships across the supplier side. We're going to go talk with the suppliers and build relationships there. And then all these lost franchisees, which in my opinion, if they set the next level to this, partner with Brent and say, Brent, bring me as many franchise consultants as you can and let them greet the people when they walk in the expo and let them walk with them to actually coach them through how to look and ask questions, like use it as a coaching center. That'd be not being blockbustered. So I see all these candidates walking around. We're going to talk to them and we're going to say, hey, we can help you and we can help guide you on and coach you on what this is. So I see it as a tremendous opportunity for a company like ours. On the franchisor side, it is a crapshoot. Now, if you're going to do it right and you're an emerging brand and you've paid the money and you've already booked this spot, or you're an established brand, doesn't matter, then use this as like your mini discovery day And so you take all the candidates that are around that marketplace. You have an office space for three days. Most likely there's someone of power that is at that booth. Use it as an opportunity to break bread with the people that you're trying to close. Like, use it as a closing center, not as an opening center. And then all of a sudden you can get a return out of it. And send the hate mail to Charles and Brent, not to me. I'm just speaking the truth.
So you obviously, you're high on it for yourself as a supplier. For the franchisors, do we think, because trade shows, this is not unique to just franchising. Every major industry still does one, and still some of the biggest do, right? There's some really large tech ones that take the attention of the world. Do we think it's possible that it may not just be the fact that it's the medium of a trade show, but it may be that the franchise brand's approach to the trade show is a little archaic? Why I say that, it's obviously a leading question, but I walk these shows and you see a guy or a gal standing there, or oftentimes sitting behind a computer, and they'll kind of get up and they'll give you a one-pager and there's a banner behind them and there's some free pens. And I think that probably worked pretty well 30 years ago. But if you compare that to some of the other industries where you do go to a trade show, they're interactive. There's real investment put into them. There's very honed in salespeople that really know how to approach it. It feels very different. And so while I said that, it's not just no because the medium may not be as effective as probably digital right now, but as a group, as a collective, as an industry, I feel like we need to do better. And I feel like what that means is putting a little more money into it, putting more strategy into it, having a defined pre-strategy show. What are you doing to drive people there that are already in the pipeline? What's the strategy when you get there? What sort of investment are you making to make it interactive, to make the messaging work, to make it different, to make it fun? And then post-show, what's your marketing strategy once you've got some people and you've talked them to execute on to do that properly? And I think most of us just show up with our pens and our one-pager and expect to get deals and then go home with our tail between our legs. My opinion, what do you think?
Brent, I think that the businesses, the franchisors that have that mindset have probably 9 out of 10 also made the decision not to be at the expo. Right? Because so aside from the good strategy you're focused on, one of the and we have conversations when I go to the shows, I'll see brands there, clients or people have conversations. Setting aside the strategy for the show, what I find, there's a lot of emerging brands that don't have a strategy, and this feels like a plug-in that's going to fix a leak in their franchise sales bucket. When you look at their banner and you look at their materials, you're like, this is a great business, or this is a lower startup cost mobile business with these nice elements, but you don't see that there. So they haven't done the groundwork. So I personally see, think about it. When a franchise development company cold calls and they do that, right, and says, hey, franchise your business, the next thing is, well, you'll come to shows. I've seen new franchisors where they have a proposal to franchise their business, and included in their pricing is showing up at the next 4 trade shows. Right. So I think you could do better, but I don't know, like what Nick said and like what you specialize in, Brent, like you have that whole digital universe. I want to be at the intersection point midnight when someone's at that pain point in their life and they're watching a great video about, one of the Raintree brands, right? I think that's where it happens.
But Nick could do that too, right? He could have decided, no, he's great at digital too, and we could have just kept doing what we're doing now, and not spent the time and the money to go to the trade show. But he said he sees an opportunity there. Do we think that? Well, I think I know the answer to this one again, but Nick, it's because you do those things, right? You've got a list. I know you guys will have an email campaign going out before. I know you'll have well-tuned folks at the show that know exactly how to speak and how to talk to the brands that are there. I know you'll have more than just a pen, and I know you'll follow up differently. Is that the primary reason you see that your company can do that when other suppliers there won't? Or tell us a little bit more about why you think the opportunity is there when Charles and I are saying, we just probably stay digital.
I'm gonna answer that. Let me throw one comment on your first comment. Like, if you think of like the big shows, like ICSC, tremendous expo. You think about like the Home Builder Show, which is non-franchise, tremendous expo. You think about the car shows where all the automobile dealers just create huge experiential things. Why is that? Because it's not just the sales team that is using those expos. It's communities that are built around like, look how much impact we can have for our brand. So like Philly Pretzel Factory, I don't know if they're exhibiting this year. I remember talking to their founder about this. I go, you spend a lot, like you invest a lot. He's like, yeah, but all these folks are our customers. We're in the Northeast, like so they bring the big van, they make the big pretzels, they give out product there, and so you have these offshoots that are looking at it that way. And I also think if like you look at the dinky franchise booths, I mean this in a kind way. It's not to throw shade, but you have a 10 by 10 with a little banner on the back and you wear your khaki pants and your logoed shirt and you try talking to people when they walk by. Well, that's not your fault. It's because the CEOs don't value the deal value that could potentially come out of that. And if they did, and they said, like, look, each deal to our organization is worth $1 million in enterprise value or in cash and royalties, all of a sudden it changes the game there. Now, if there's 10,000 people that are going to walk this floor over the 3 days, you're changing your approach because now you're like, how do we capture their attention as a customer? Marketing is involved, and how do we capture their attention? Because we know that each of these people could be worth $1 million to our business. So I don't think we look at the data the right way. But the reason I then look at this as a tremendous opportunity is because like I always look for opportunity to solve a problem. And again, I see franchisees that are going to be lost. Like if you've ended up at an expo, you're lost. Like the internet will solve all your issues. So we're going to have buyers that are lost. Some of them will have some money, and we're going to be able to hopefully snag some of those and help them through our sales side. We're going to have franchisors that are lost, the emerging brands that took this crapshoot, and they're going to have the perception that they're getting tons of leads. None of them are going to call you afterwards. And so we're going to have all these franchisors that are disappointed because they just spent 20 grand and they didn't get anything for it. And then I look at the bigger brands that are exhibiting there. We need to increase our percentage. Like I look at the percentage of clients that we represent at this expo, and it's very tiny. So I'm looking at it in a different way now. I'm going to tell you guys exactly bits of this, but I sent an email to our team. There's going to be 5 of us there. And so what I'm doing on our team is I have pre-conference, Brian and Amy to work the list to schedule meetings. And then Nick is going to schedule a pre-show webinar on how to get deals done at IFE. Nick is going to schedule a pre-show webinar for candidates, how to buy your first franchise at a franchise expo. So we're going to market those 2 out there. Chad is going to schedule meetups coffee with all of the clients that are going there. Nick and Paige are going to create new creative to launch and announce Fran Camp as a part of this session. Carson is going to go pitch the New York media to make sure that we're in front of all of them. And she's going to go meet with media while we're there because we're in New York. And then at the conference, we separated out roles and responsibilities that Nick and Amy are going to work the booth. Brian, Chad, and Carson are going to work the floor. They're dividing up the rows on who's going to own what. And I said the idea is that by the time the show is over, every ZOR has been talked with, and the suppliers are, I said non-legal and non-marketing, have been talked to about Fran Camp. And so I'm sharing this because I'll share these things on Blue in the Face. It's more of the game plan of, I know that every single human being in that room could either come to Fran Camp, could read 1851, or could use our help on how we either market their business or grow their business. So it's all in the way that I'm game planning against it.
Exactly. So there's a strategy there that you've well thought through ahead of time, and you have certain tactics, certain audiences, and it's very well thought out. And I just don't think most of the brands, to both your points, do that. They expect to show up in the booth and the deals to fall in their lap. And like anything, it just doesn't work that way.
Well, I thought about this. This is a franchise fight, but it is what it is. Like I was thinking about like some of these conferences, even like any of them. I don't need to name names. what is the value of them going there? Like, are they going to sell franchises? No. Are they going to really gain new knowledge? Most likely not. An emerging brand has a little bit more runway because they're learning what franchising is and they haven't put the 10,000 hours to be an expert. But majority of these situations are either in an expo, it activity when you don't have deals, like it shows like you're trying. So it's more of the political side. And then to get another job, like why would you, like you're in this place, why are you not networking to get another job? And you can look at the turnover rate of most people in franchise development. So like those are like, if we're calling it is what it is, like that's part of the model here. And it's not wrong, like it's actually right, but there's other motives that go into these things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that ultimately, if you're heading to a trade show, if you're heading to this one in particular, the message here is very simple. You've got to have a game plan in place. You've got to know exactly what you're trying to get out of it and how you're going to go about it. Very simple.
Kirk, who I'm labeling, and I didn't even know whether Kirk was watching or not. I just assumed he was going to listen to Charles's franchise fight at the end of this. But Kirk said really interesting points. We have never exhibited at franchise expos. We always thought there was more value in going to the expos where our ideal demographic were hanging out, running shows, marathon expos, education expos. We try to target people who are passionate about what we do and share our values, and then we introduce them to franchising. But maybe we're missing a trick at franchise expos. One of you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would. I think Kirk's strategy is actually smart. To go where not a franchise expo in this case, but where there's other enthusiasts, and then find like-minded people and convert them to potentially franchise investment. His business is also a lower startup cost, mobile type business. So he may get more traction at a franchise expo. And by the way, my critique is not even as a franchise lawyer. I could absolutely say as a franchisor also, I invested the money in going to an expo, the team, the trade, but I think I would rather focus on affinity groups and smaller communities to look for those relationships. The expo is just a big look, again, cost benefit analysis. I'm not saying they're not valuable. I'm just saying if I'm managing my dollars, I'd rather spend it on amplified digital. In Kirk's situation, that's what I would do. At a certain point, once I reach saturation, then maybe I do go to some shows.
I think Kirk's saying exactly the right thing though. On the other side, on the expos that he's going to, he said, let me go be with people that are passionate about what I do, and then I'll educate them about franchising. And I bet you those shows are actually, better structured shows. It's not just like I feel like. This is going to sound like another dig. It is a dig because of the category, but home and garden. See, dig? You dig in a garden like that? The home and garden shows, like these expos that are like in the middle of nowhere convention centers, but that's very hyper local to those communities, So, point of all of this, I think it's change is required to increase the impacted value of what these could potentially do.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think ultimately, like with this strategy, it's a fine one. You just have to understand, and we've talked about this, you two, especially on this podcast, regardless of the fact that you're going after folks that don't necessarily have an interest or an understanding in franchising. With that in mind, you really need to ensure that your content speaks to someone and your website and your material about the benefits of franchising, what it actually is. If you're meeting folks and you're at these shows, a health show or whatever, I think I saw there, and you think they got it, they're not going to get it. They're going to get the idea of franchising from you. They're going to go to your website, and that content has to speak to the fact that you know that your buyer needs real education on what franchising is, what the benefits are, and who it should apply to. And as an industry, certainly brands like the ones that I work with, where we're advertising heavily on Facebook, that's the same instance, right? We're getting folks that are scrolling through and may come across something in franchising. If you're doing that, you've got to make sure you haven't skipped over really solid content on franchising and how you're doing it well and how you're doing it better. I think it's really important to know that that's got to be there, because your candidates are going to then go online and research you, and they can get lost.
Hey, to anybody that's watching live, like we see a bunch of you. If you want to add in your comments, it doesn't have to be a question. Just comment on how are you approaching franchise expos. It would be good to have some of that commentary in this chat box if you feel like participating, whether you're for it or against it, or you have an idea on how to make them better. Add participation into these. I mean, at the end of the day, all of these things, and I think it depends on the budget size. Like capital changes everything. Like if your capital pull is this big, then maybe you're doing the expos. If it's tight like this, maybe you're keeping it more specific on the calculated crapshoots, which is your brand story and a little bit of marketing to your customer base to consider buying your franchise. So that's why it's not cut and dry. I talked with a brand. I was just thinking, like every time I'm honest about something, someone gets pissed off, but that's how this industry works. I'm talking to the brand, not our client. They exhibited at the multi-unit conference. They're an emerging brand. Their website is not great. Their brand story is not great. I said, well, why did you exhibit there? And they go, because that's where the multi-unit buyers are, and we want the multi-unit owner. I said, but every restaurant brand in America, if I said on the count of three, tell me who you want, they're going to say a multi-unit owner. I go, and you haven't done the foundational work. So why is someone going to pick you? And they haven't tried your product. So why would they buy you? He's like, well, I didn't think about that. I was like, well, like that's what you got to think through. You got to think through, like, is my audience here and are my buying audience here? But on the flip side, and this is where the money grab, it's like, let's be responsible. Like some consultant who is coaching them, tell them maybe go to the multi-unit show because the content is actually really good. They get good speakers and they're putting people on stage who have been there, done that, and you can gain nuggets. Don't spend the $20,000 exhibiting there. You're not ready. So anyway, I'm throwing that out there. Comments?
Charles?
No, I think we covered it. I look, and to Kirk's point, as we leave that, just consider Kirk is talking about going to an expo with affinity groups and very targeted communities. Whereas when you're at these expos, it's just a very big community. There's been no pre-filtering. So just to, evaluate that as you're focusing on brand story and everything else.
Quickling said, are expos mainly for brokers, or are some people aimlessly going to an expo to find a business to start?
I mean, the vast majority are not brokers. It's local community, people in the local area where the expo's at. The expo is going to run ads on cable TV about finding the next great business. And, some people, I think out of interest, and others who are genuinely interested in buying a business are going to come. And what you'll find also is there'll be a good percentage of people that are current business owners who are going to the expo to see what other people are doing and evaluating whether or not they should franchise their business. And that's why it turns out these expos that are about selling franchises, you'll see there's a ton of companies there who help people franchise their business. They go to these expos and they're selling their services. So I think those suppliers may get more sales out of an expo than the actual franchisors.
And so, yes, it's true. And I think
We also, at this point, with this question too, there's a lot of new franchisors. Sometimes you can get
a little confused on what we mean by
trade shows. So when you're working with a consultant network, we're not referring to the conferences that they host.
Correct.
If you're working with a consultant network and you're told, hey, come once or twice a year and meet the consultants, yes, you absolutely should do that. That's part of what's needed in that relationship marketing, in that affiliate marketing program. You've got to go and put some face time in with those folks. We're talking about purely franchise buyers going to trade shows looking to buy a franchise. And absolutely, to Nick's point, there will be buyers at the show coming up here in New York. But most brands likely won't receive a buyer. Some that have the right strategy and tactics in place will. They're two very different things. Consultant trade shows or conferences, yes. If you're in those networks, please go.
Charles, you're being quiet on this.
No, I gave my input on this. I think we covered the topic pretty good, right?
This is Charles and I's least favorite topic so far, because we would have just preferred a no. Next question. Don't go.
I mean, I understand. I understand the viewpoint. What other things are top of mind? Actually, why don't I shift this question? And again, like if our audience wants to participate, great. If not, we'll wrap up here shortly. But let me flip this question. And Brent, let me use Voodoo as the example. If you haven't tried Voodoo and you have no relationship with the brand, and this is you thinking about how you could get to Voodoo. Voodoo could obviously market to you through Facebook or LinkedIn and maybe catch you at one of these conferences if they went that route. But I mean, we say like all the tools are at your fingertips, but the reality is it's biased tools, because if you land on a franchise portal, it's the only ones that are paying for it on that portal. PR, you read the media. I hate to break this to everybody, but there's usually a PR firm behind all those stories that hit the media. Like it's biased. But how does that brand get found? I mean, you guys obviously did a great job on it, but maybe Voodoo is a bad example. But one of these brands that is like, they know they have a good business model. Level economics is good, good infrastructure around it. How does it get found?
So you mean,
Because Voodoo, my franchise, the franchisor brand that I have, Voodoo Brewing Company, we didn't use a trade show, and so how did
we get out there to get it all going? Is that the question?
Yeah, especially with a product that it's good. It's hard to buy a franchise without trying the product.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, certainly, and that applies to a lot of the retail brands, a lot of the food brands. Most folks buying a plumbing franchise or a painting
Franchise don't need to try the product to get excited about it and understand if it's them. But folks, when it's a tangible retail item, especially like Voodoo, yeah, they want to try it. We really invest in a lot of content, and we talk about this a lot on the show and advise new brands on it too. We didn't skip on it either. We probably started the franchise campaign with 10 or 15 different franchise videos, all professionally made. And then if you go and research, there's a long list now of videos. So we invested heavily in video. We really try to put that experience into video, so anyone looking into the brand could really start to almost feel, taste, touch it just by constant video. So that was really the first thing. Then everything that we do, an omni-channel marketing approach where we really try and take people through a journey, top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, using Facebook, then franchise portals, then Google, doing some of the more detailed things that needs a deeper conversation than today. So it's really getting the content right, getting the channels right, and then having a process that really explains what's going to happen at Discovery Day, and as we're working through folks and trying to understand if they fit us or not, making them really excited about, do I get the invite to attend? Because if you do get the invite to attend, the red carpet's rolled out, and you get to try the product and do all of those good things. So,
I mean, it sounds like you led with culture. You made the culture known. You chose, let's build the education on the culture. And then when they come and try the product, they're already sold on the culture.
Yeah, exactly right. It's about the culture.
It's also about the community. Really clearly portraying the types of folks that are franchised with us and that are owners of Voodoos. And do you fit into that community too? Do you buy into the values of the culture, and do you fit into the community? Are these your people? And again, a ton of photography, a ton of websites, collateral, videography get you there. They really do. You got to invest in it. To your point too.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to give you a plug, my man, because it's true. Like
we sold a lot and fast, and about 6 months ago realized that our support infrastructure was getting strained by the number of new openings. We had like 60, 70 pubs opening. And these are big build outs, and it's not a very simple, quick opening. And so we made the decision 6 months ago to say, no more. We're going to turn the marketing down from 25,000 a month to just keeping PR on. And so the only thing that we do is PR, because that actually supports the local franchisees too. We get kind of double bang for our buck. And if you do a Google search right now of Voodoo, you'll see that we're in a different publication 3-4 times a day right now, because Nick's team is doing a great job. And that is a fundamental part of the strategy too, because not only do we get leads from that, but we also drive customers to our franchisees. It's win-win. And so that's the only thing we're doing right now strategically, because we're not trying to grow by any more than a few franchisees this year at this point. But that's really the crux of it. Content that communicates the culture and community, then the right lead generation channels, and have someone else tell the story. You don't necessarily need to work with a PR firm, but boy, it helps when you do, when someone else is talking about how great your brand is, and it's not just you saying I'm so great all the time.
I think there's a big insight in what you just said, and it bridges Charles and you. Which the insight, like if I'm really thinking about this, like you selling culture and then come and try our product. Again, very rare for a restaurant brand to do that, a restaurant franchise or a food franchise. They usually lead with come try our product, and what Kurt said, then we'll talk to you about our franchise. It's interesting, like I think through, because we've been onboarding some brands into Growth Club. And when we say tell us your story, it's like, in the nicest way, they're just boring stories. And so you think about the value of the broker network. You just said, get someone else to tell your story for you. That's what the brokers do. Like they're telling the story for you to prospective buyers who had no idea that insert painting brand existed. And so the broker is that catalyst to educate it. But the material that's given to the broker is about the business model versus the culture. What happens if you take a play out of Voodoo's playbook, build the culture videos, give that to the broker so the broker can share this with their buyer and get them jazzed up of the culture of painting. And then we'll tell you how our painting business model works. Like it almost is like the tool is there. The broker has the leads, but the broker doesn't have the equipment to tell the story, which is what Charles keeps going back to. He celebrates any of his brands. Outsiders Coffee, like such a powerful video on their site because they sold culture. You can come try our coffee later, but they sold culture. So I think there needs to, that's the monumental shift in the way that you're giving the collateral to those that are going to tell your story for you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when we're talking about selling a franchise or selling anything, right? Like what we're talking about here is there's 3 ways to do it. You can, like we said, talk about how good you are. You can prove how good you are. You put that product and you tangibly provide an experience. And again, the best thing that we try to do is have other people talk about how good we are. That's the third one's usually the one that is the most effective. And to your point, there's a number of ways of doing it. Franchise brokers, influencers, PR folks, and then just raving franchisees that you've done a really good job and have met their experience, their expectations. They're open, profitable, and happy. And for us, that's the be all end all. You know, we like to use some of those other tactics to get there, but it's all about making sure the franchisees are the ones out there singing the story about the culture, the community, the product's great, and I'm making money and having fun doing it.
Kind of leads with this. We just finished our FDD with Charles. We were in FBA. What is the best way to introduce ourselves to the consultants to get them to have interest in you? Obviously, our brand story needs to be there, but any additional tips?
I want to add on. I want to answer Jeff's question and add on to what Brent and everything we're building here. So, and this is important, Jeff, too, as you're dealing with brokers. For everyone going to the expo, and we're talking about not being ready, is it effective or not? I think the best way you could succeed when you approach a broker group and when you approach these expos is your goal should not be to sell a franchise. Your goal should be to communicate with and potentially identify good fit franchisees or a good fit broker and start that conversation. Understand you're not closing the deal at a broker conference. you're not going to close the deal at the expo. It's everything that's going to happen afterwards, which gets to all that advice that Brent and Nick were sharing in terms of media, right? So for Jeff, I would start off with, right, brand story, and we go through it with all of our clients. I think the advice for Jeff and every new franchisor is take the next 12 months, view it as your seasoning process for your franchise system. Take a look at version 1.0 of your website, and 3 months from now, have it as version 1.4. Add the founder story, turn on the third-party validation, the 1851 stories, all the things that Brent's talking about. Now start the conversations with the broker group, right? So now you're learning, so learn, and then you're not going to be activating these broker relations or closing those deals for 12 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's spot on. And I think
Like, this is interesting, right? Because that question, it relates to the feedback on trade shows, right? If you expect to, just like at a trade show, buy your 10 by 10 booth, spend your $8,000, bring your pen and your one pager and wait for the deals to come.
Right.
It's the same as you sign with FBA and you put your one pager together and you do some of those things that we've given you to do. That's 10% of the battle. There's a few core things that the consultants want to see.
For you to really get in their inventory of brands
they want to show. The first thing, and unfortunately, and I think Nick has maybe a business for anyone listening out here that might solve this problem one day near in the future, but you got to pay, and you got to pay at least $30,000 a unit. That's really the going rate that they're looking for right now. They're going to want to see what's the item 19, or how do I make sure that the economics of this business are strong enough for me to show my candidates. They want to know that there's a validation there, and we can talk about what you do if you don't have that, but they'll want to know that franchisees are being that third-party validator that they'll need to. And they'll want to really understand the business and if it can, where it can fit to in terms of territory, right? They want to understand how it's different and better and be able to pitch it well too. That goes to the brand story part. So they need those four things. If you're brand new to this and you don't have validation, what I'm about to say, you've got to go even further. But getting into the consultant networks, it's got to be your full-time job. And if you've got another full-time job of building the franchise or doing digital marketing, then you need to find someone or work relentlessly to do both. But you've got to be reaching out, calling any single consultant there that you can, trying to have a one-on-one conversation. You've got to be following up. You've got to make sure that anytime you do sell a franchise, that they all know why and where and how. You've got to be doing announcements on LinkedIn and social media and emailing. You've got to treat this like it's your own separate marketing division that needs constant attention. You're fighting for the attention of the consultants, and you're fighting against brands that have people doing this all day. They have big budgets that are well prepared, and again, paying $30,000 while they still have great item 19s and a host of validators. You're up against it. Now, nobody does it perfectly, and I do find that new brands coming in, if they just apply themselves and they treat it like it's almost a full-time job, then yeah, you can build a franchise system. You can start to get a core group of franchisees from successfully working this consultant networks and then growing from there. But it's hard, and most people don't tell you that. It is hard, and you've got to apply yourself if you want to see success.
You're competing against I think, Brent, what you just said, you're competing against a group of franchisors that are super well capitalized. They'll pay double of what you will to get that same candidate into their system. And then because they're super well capitalized, they're actually going to out support you, so they can actually prove that they're going to out support you for unit level economic growth. And that's really tough, because if you're paying a monthly fee to a broker company and you're lost in the shuffle and you're not going to get shown anyway, then you're better off saving that capital, saving up the rainy day fund. And when you're ready, then you can go attack the broker network. But I think you have to have the capital, and you have to have the time to even have a fighting chance to be seen in those communities the way that it's currently structured. That doesn't mean that doesn't change in the future. So similar to Expos in 2005 through 2010 were quite good. Now it's changed. It's just evolved. It's just a different approach that goes against this. So why don't we close on this? Let me shift it. We talk about our viewpoints, but single most important thing that you can do wrong to lose at franchising. The single most important thing that you can do wrong to lose at franchising? Brent, what is the single thing that you could do that you are going to lose if you do this?
Oh man. I'm going to stick to development since we've largely had a development
Focused conversation today, right? So, what's the worst possible thing that you can do in franchising?
I would say it's over-promising and positioning your brand in an illegal way. And I still see it.
All the time, I see the Facebook ads, I see brands making illegal earnings claims. And Charles, I probably took yours. Sorry, mate.
Oh no.
But
That hammer's coming, guys.
it is. You can see what's coming down in California, and I feel like folks, both consultants and young franchise brands, that talk about how much money you can make without a very clearly defined
And correlated item
19. Brands that make that mistake, I just feel like, Charles, maybe you can weigh in on this, but I feel like that's about to blow up. And we've seen the wave of responsible franchising, and we've talked back and forth about the pros and cons of this current wave. But I do think it's going to continue to fuel what could be coming from a government standpoint, from a regulation standpoint, from maybe just more attention. And yeah, that's for me probably the worst way you could go down in franchising is to get shut down in states or more for making illegal earnings.
I mean, picking up on that, Brent, from actually, ironically, like sort of a non-legal standpoint, right? So when we work with our clients, I'm pretty confident in their training and the item 19s and where we're at. What I see when I have the conversations of franchisors we haven't worked with, they're frustrated, they're out of the gate the wrong way. There's not just legally, but conceptually and from a strategy standpoint, their plan isn't right. And ironically, whether it's, they're a flexible mobile business, but their FDD was built as if it's a retail static business and they don't but so what scares me the most, or the biggest mistake you can make, are the ones that aren't so obvious. And so for me, for the emerging brands, you really need to have that game plan. So like to Jeff's comment earlier, you need to know that for the next 12 months, you should be building your foundation and making things better. So I think the biggest mistake is not having the game plan, right? And not having that 5-year game plan, not knowing, what, again, back to the example with the broker groups, when I recommend to clients to join one at the emerging stage, I'm like, for the next 12 months, I want you to observe and learn and start building your assets and then activate that. But where the mistake happens is the brands that don't know that game plan, they keep going to those conferences and pay for being on a cover, but they're not ready for closing those deals. So to me, it's not understanding the game plan. And I agree though, Brent, there's like, and I saw it yesterday in terms of legal item 19, people are just sticking things out there and they think there's no consequence to this, and there will be. And what the worst part is not even the government. Worst part is 5 years from now as you build up strong and then you have some uncertainty.
Mine is, and it builds on both what you guys are saying. So there's alignment in this, but it's selling franchises, not developing franchisees. I can think through several emerging brands that sold franchises. They were so desperate to sell that they sold to people who weren't well capitalized, have no money for scale, and have their expectations not met because they didn't have enough money to market the business in the first place. And so now what's happening is you're hearing the term lawsuit. And a lawsuit for an emerging franchisor will derail what you wanted to accomplish as a brand. And so it's so important to develop franchisees that Charles and I have a client who he's been franchising for 2 years. He falls under the stat that Brent shared. 67% don't sell a franchise in their first 2 years. But he has been unapologetic about saying yes to the wrong person. And now he's there. He's going to get his first deal done. But it took time and it took patience. But he's now going to develop a franchisee who aligned with what he was looking for from a financial standpoint and a commitment standpoint, which is going to set him up to go get the second franchisee. He's going to do it the same way. He didn't work on this false timeline of I have to sell 50 units in 1 year. He's developing franchisees, and I think that's the single largest mistake that emerging franchisor does. You get so overexcited to sell that first deal, and then you do that 10 more times, and then you look at those 10 and you're like, well, maybe those aren't the right, and now you create this like mindset, like, how do I default then? You've already lost. Your game is over. You're not going to recover from that. You sell the brand, move on, try something else. And so I think that's and it comes back to expectation setting, but I think that's an important one to note. So that's what we got today, guys. Good stuff. I do think I'll tease it on here for anybody that's watching. I'm going to invite on, whether they come or not, a few people for this next one to face the jury on responsible franchising, and we'll do that as the next topic. And then the one after that, for any of you that have watched this, what I would like to do, if you're willing to, is and leave a comment on this if you're willing to volunteer for the one after that. We would like to pull up some websites, and we'll evaluate your brand live on here, which gives you tremendous insights from the three of us, whether they're right or wrong. But if you want to volunteer to have your websites reviewed for us by us live and give commentary, good and bad, then do so, and you'll get value out of that. So we'll do that one, the one after this. So that'll create some form to this. But thanks to our audience for watching. We appreciate you. This is another episode of FranX.